BCD Video is our partner. And we're here today to talk about the impact and the importance of networking in the video surveillance environment. Mounif Haffar is my colleague, and unfortunately he's not able to attend this morning. So Darren has agreed to help me through some of the technical parts and discuss some of the automation capabilities and some of the more intricate elements of networks that are kind of beyond me from a technical perspective. So Darren, I don't know if you want to do your own introduction, but
Sure. Darren Giacomini. I run the Advanced Systems Architecture team at BCD Video. I'm the professional services and focus on emerging products and technologies like Revolve and co-development of the BCD Video application that automates the deployment of network switches from smartphones and tablets.
All right. So, you know, I'm relatively new to this industry. I started and got involved in around 2003. And at that time, IP video surveillance was just becoming a thing. It was still very much analog. And then about, 6 years later, I ended up at Tyco, and we were just then beginning to see that kind of transformation from, or the tipping point, I guess, from analog to IP. And so the point in this slide is really to say that back in the day when I first got involved, and maybe many of you were involved before this, it was, I think, relatively easy from a connectivity perspective, not to minimalize the complexity of video surveillance, because I was kind of when I saw how complex cameras and all of the aspects of video surveillance was. But when I was involved in it early on, it was kind of, you had cameras and you plugged coax into a recording platform of some kind, and there you go, configure the cameras and set up, you know. Today, not that further forward, video surveillance is much more complex in the sense that you've got all kinds of devices and things that all have to work across a network in order for functionality of a robust video surveillance system. So I think in that context, they're much more complex from a networking perspective. And I think a lot of people, I think incorrectly believe that if you can plug something into a switch and you have this basic connectivity, that everything's going to be great. And my view is nothing's further from the truth. And if this would move forward, I'd talk about the next slide. Let's see. First of all, can people still hear me?
Oh yeah, you're fine. You're absolutely fine.
Hear you. Can you not advance the slide?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm trying to advance the screen, and it's not cooperating well. So I'm not really sure what's up with that.
So, Bill, why don't you work on advancing the screen, and I'll just kind of talk a little bit further about what you touched on. Because,
yeah, go ahead, please.
I've been watching this, through when I first came into the industry. I was working for Pelco at the time as their lead network architect. And I can tell you that the industry has changed dramatically. And I see a cycle of people that will, or customers that often find themselves migrating to VMS platform after VMS platform, trying to solve problems that they can never really solve. And, I'll talk to customers who will say, well, I was with VMS platform A, and I had the following problems. And then I went to B to solve it, and I've got different problems. And we see more often than not that if you don't have the underlying infrastructure built properly, and you don't have the network built properly to support video traffic, it doesn't matter what you put on top of it. It simply becomes, it's the same kind of thought of, blaming the car when the road's really the issue. It doesn't matter what cars you put on the road. If you have a horrible road, it's not going to drive well. And the same thing, goes for networking. If you don't have a solid foundation, if you don't build the network properly, then it doesn't matter what video management system you work with. It's simply not going to perform the way it's supposed to perform. And there is a big difference between building an IT infrastructure for an environment that supports traditional IT or supports, file services, file sharing, and centralized file storage, and building a network to support live and archived or recorded video. If you look at the traffic flows in a traditional IT environment, a traditional IT environment will be coming from the center of the data center and being pushed out, where you have people accessing files and structures and all the data gets pushed out from a central point. If you take a look at what we do in video surveillance, you don't have a single server or a couple of servers or a server farm that are serving things out. You have, in some cases, hundreds or thousands of cameras independently pushing those video flows in. And when you do that, you have to completely build the network in a different way. You have to actually apply, the network engineering in almost a reverse paradigm of what you expect the traffic flow. And even some of the best network engineers, from the IT side, really don't specialize on that. So what's really cool about what we built with Alcatel-Lucent is we're automating that. We're taking that knowledge that's required to really build that network the right way and build it right the first time. And we're pulling that into the automated app so that anybody can do it. And it's interesting because when you get the network right the first time, you're going to see a major drop in service requirements for that client. You're not going to be rolling trucks out to sites over and over again trying to fix issues that you can't resolve. So it's a very, very unique thing that we're doing with Alcatel-Lucent, and it's not something that just started yesterday. This started back when Bill and I were actually working together at Avaya. So we started building the idea for this automated deployment 7 or 8 years ago with how do you automate, how do you remove the complexity for networking and ensure that you get it right the first time.
Darren, can you see the slide deck up now on my screen?
I can see the slide deck up.
Okay, so Bill, let's have you kick right back in where you were. Video surveillance, the old days, and you just tell me to move forward, and so I shall.
Hey, Scott. Looks like Bill's having some audio issues. So
just go ahead and go forward on the slide, and while he's trying to get back in, I'll just kind of kick in and talk about.
Okay, let's
go
here. Start there, Darren.
Okay, so why does the network matter? When you look at how things get manifested and why the network is so important, over 80% of the calls that come in that cannot be resolved by a TAC or a support team in an efficient manner in a time frame of less than 2 weeks are almost always infrastructure related. When we tracked this, when I ran some of the support teams for the networking side when I was working at Pelco, we saw that anytime it went to an escalation point, anytime it went to an engineering team or a support team and it could not be resolved quickly, there was almost always some kind of infrastructure involved with that. And in most cases, the infrastructure is either a poorly designed network or maybe a network that's not set up properly. And so in this slide, this talks about the marker of 75%, and this is based upon an independent research study that we had done while Bill and I were both still at Avaya, that determined that 75% of the issues that arise that people complain about can be attributed in some way to actual network problems. So Scott, if you advance the slide, I'll talk a little bit about what those are. So this was actually a capture from the independent research that we had done. And so if you take a look at 22% of people claim that they have camera or VMS issues. And I'm going to tell you that's actually going to manifest itself as almost like a Trojan horse or manifest itself as something that's not accurate. And the reason being is when you first realize that you have problems on a VMS platform, it's going to be you have degraded video quality, you have artifacting, you have loss of video, you have tiling, pixelation, tearing, latent PTZ control. And the first person that you call, the first entity that you almost always call is your integrator, and usually right after that, the VMS vendor or the camera vendor. And if the infrastructure isn't set right, the problems that actually manifest themselves and the symptoms appear as if it's a problem with the VMS vendor or if it's a problem with the camera vendor, but really it has to do with the underlying infrastructure itself. So I would say that 22% is actually not accurate. 22% is not going to be camera or VMS issues, but it's going to manifest itself from a root network-based problem. Then you'll see that you have 33% of people talk about delays in calling up video footage and why that's problematic. And this one I was at one of the Alcatel-Lucent events where I presented for their sales team and talked a little bit about this 33% in delays in pulling up video footage. This one really hits home for me because when I was giving a symposium out in New York, we had Port Authority, NYPD, and a bunch of other entities. And the guy who was presenting talked about on stage one of the phenomenons, unfortunately, have going on these days, which is active shooters. And active shooters in schools and businesses. And he said something that really hit home to me. He said, in the event where you have an active shooter, seconds equals lives. And I thought about that. And I thought about the way that a VMS responds and how sometimes people will say 15, 16-second call-up times for a 4x4 is acceptable, or latent PTZ control is acceptable. And is it really? If you're talking about seconds equal lives, and why that hits home for me is, my wife teaches special education. She's in the school environment, and both of my kids go to that school. If they had an active shooter in that environment, it's not okay that the police and emergency responders are having a 16 to 20 second delay in pulling up video, because it's true. The ability to respond and see where somebody's in that active event really can make a difference. And when you don't build the network infrastructure properly, you get these delays in calling up video time.
Darren, yeah. Let's just see. Bill, are you back on? Do I see a phone number for you now?
Yeah, I'm calling in, but I'm not sure if I'm still in the still in the Zoom meeting. And
you are.
You seeing? So
yeah,
you're seeing.
I've got your slide deck. Your slide deck is up. You don't need to worry. If you can see, you've got your slide deck on your screen coming from my screen, which is what Darren is speaking to.
Oh, so you're on slide 6 right now?
Yeah, so right now, Bill,
okay.
I was just talking about, on the previous slide, I was just talking about latent video call-up times and how an active shooter, so that can be very problematic, and why those issues that you saw on that previous slide, while they manifest themselves, such as lapses in video footage due to spanning tree convergence and things like that, and blurry video can be problematic. If they are not resolved within a 2-week time frame within the vendors you're working with, it's almost always infrastructure related, meaning it's a poor network, poor physical connectivity. And I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Bill and let him run with it.
Well, hang on. I think you might have spoken a little too soon because, all right, I think I've got my own local instance of the presentation. Somehow it looks like the Zoom meeting had dropped. So, Scott, if you're driving, I'm not seeing your screen, but I'm seeing my own. And so
Number 7.
Move to slide 7. So
yes, sir.
I think, Darren probably talked a lot about, kind of the whys. And the first part of this was really to kind of emphasize the importance of the network and what bad things happen when the network is not either properly designed or set up, or you're just using a bad network architecture and technology. So if that's true, and I think it is, then what do you look for in a network solution? Well, obviously you want something of high performance, and we already talked about the need for low latency in the context of bringing up video quickly and making sure that you don't have issues with video as it's being displayed. You want to have a network that's scalable so that as your surveillance system grows and your requirements change over time, and they will due to just different cameras and different things that people are putting on these networks these days, you want to ensure that you have an underlying architecture and infrastructure of networks that can support that without having to go through unnatural acts to try to get it to work properly. So this presentation in general focuses on 3 elements. And one of them is the performance aspects and the resiliency and security. Another one is on the automation side of this, because automation is, I think, a key factor in making that decision, because if you have to spend a lot of time with a lot of expensive network engineers to try to design or deploy a network, it certainly does impact efficiency. It becomes very expensive because people like Darren are not inexpensive. And so you've got some significant benefits if you can select a network vendor that has automation tools and capabilities built in that streamline that process. And then security is important. Probably everybody has seen instances where either IoT or surveillance networks have been used to hack into and then gain access to other adjacent systems across the network and compromise customer data or safety, or any number of different things that happen when people with malicious intent can intrude through a surveillance network. So with that in mind, an ideal solution on slide number 8 has all those capabilities built in. And so when we look at what ALE has, I think unique in the market is these built-in capabilities in terms of provisioning simplicity, which reduces your costs, the ability to secure the network through some things we'll talk about in a few minutes further on, but inherent in the capabilities of our network is the ability to ensure that unauthorized access is prevented. But if people do attempt to get in and maybe successful in getting into the first gate, essentially we can isolate them and ensure that there's no additional access to network resources. Because of the underlying technology called shortest path bridging that we'll talk about, you get high quality video, you get nearly instantaneous failover, you get extraordinarily low latency, and you get simplicity in putting these things together. You don't have to spend a tremendous amount of time configuring redundant links and figuring out what happens when one of them fails and other things that are inherent weaknesses in other network architectures. And then the mobile app that I think Darren may have mentioned, that co-developed with BCD and ALE, provides that layer of automation and enables the rapid deployment of even very complex networks without having to deploy a technician on site who is a networking savvy person. And then maybe more importantly, after the fact, if problems do occur, and they do occur, 75% of the time, those are network related. And if you have to send out a networking expert to do the troubleshooting and diagnostics to figure that problem out and resolve it, that's time, that's money, that's unhappy customers, and so on. So this tool, while it sounds simple, mobile app, has embodied in it all those capabilities that allow you to upload configurations, from a previous switch that was there. After it's been replaced, it allows you to do some pretty advanced diagnostics and kind of remote management from the mobile app. So all those things combine to give you a very secure, very robust, very high performance network that I think meets and touches all those points we talked about earlier in terms of why the network's important. So on to slide number 9, I think ALE improves your overall video surveillance experience in a number of different ways, and I won't read all of those, but in some of the the key points are the provisioning aspect, the scalability, the ability to eliminate or certainly minimize the lapses in video, the pixelation, the tearing, and the other things that are prevalent in other networks because of the general underperformance of those networks. And then no matter what kind of, of systems that come at this later. So, when I started in this industry, when IP cameras were coming in, HD cameras were just coming on the scene, right? Megapixel, there was 2 megapixel cameras was kind of state of the art. Today we're at 4K and then, 8K and things like that drive the demand for ever increasing capacities on the network. And if you have to redesign every time you want to do something like that, make a change to implement new technology, it gets expensive, complex, and prone to failure. So the architecture that's built in to our network network equipment allows this scalability, this sort of plug and play and add capacity to the network without having to go through an elaborate and expensive redesign. So again, not reading all of this stuff, but I think if you focus on the right side of that screen, the business impact, the things you want to focus on are getting it deployed quickly, reliably, and with 100% functionality. You want video to work all the time so you don't have experiences like Darren referred to in an active shooter or other situation where you need to see what's going on right now because lives matter. Very scalable, as we talked about, highly secure. And then these things contribute to a better end user experience, and maybe more importantly for you as an integrator is this reduced operational expense for you because you're the person, you're the company that gets called when things don't work, and then ultimately for the customer because they have to end up paying for these things. So in general, if you can look at and deploy a network that's got an architecture that supports a simplicity, this rapid failover, the scalability, traffic isolation, separation, and security, configuration ease, and better performance, you will improve the business outcome for the system that you're deploying at your customer, and then the customer is ultimately going to be happier. So slide number 10 now, or sorry, 11. So some of the capabilities that are built in, and I think Darren again may have talked or alluded to these things, but the provisioning capability, which is so much of the complexity within the network, can be done at the edge. So you don't have to go into the core of the network and reconfigure that core every time you want to make some provisioning changes. These things happen at the edge of the network, and it finds its way, if you will, the path from the cameras to the VMS system or whatever else is on the network automatically through the core of the network without having to do this complex reconfiguration. You know, some of the things that are built in are the ability to have redundant links active all the time, so you don't have this failover scenario that requires, you know, some convergence to happen if one link fails, and now you have to the system has to activate a new link. So it's kind of inherent in the architecture of the system that you have this built-in redundancy if you've configured it with multiple links. The ability to very flexibly and quickly being able to add new services and build out the network more expansively across a campus or an enterprise. And then the security aspect of this, I think, can't be understated. In a couple of slides forward, we'll look at this notion of segmentation or hypersegmentation, being able to isolate various types of traffic on the network, so there's no risk of one plane seeing another plane of a network. So if you've got IoT somewhere and you know, sensors somewhere and cameras somewhere else, and you know, and data on the same network, the ability to isolate that traffic and prevent intrusion from one to the other. So we've kind of built in all of these carrier grade types of capabilities with very little complexity, and gives you this kind of robust, secure network infrastructure. So let's see, without trying to be technical here, I'm looking at shortest path bridging, which is an industry standard, and we've implemented it in an industry standard way. Some of our competitors have not, but it makes the network less complicated. And you know, all the things we've talked about with edge provisioning, setting up the core one time, not having to reconfigure and re-architect every time you expand a network or make some changes. So in general, then it makes your whole environment more efficient. You're sharing multiple paths. You know, no need to have this kind of high latency failover situations. Performance dramatically improved because of that. If it's you, then it saves you time, your technicians, your company, your technical people. Your customer doesn't have to get as involved in complex network changes as well. Because of the automation tools that are built in, and because of this kind of elimination of, or sort of minimizing the numbers of touches that have to happen on a network to make changes, you're not going to get this human, human error factor introduced into that. I mean, oftentimes, every time you touch a network, there's a risk of compromising something, and just can't have that in a mission critical video surveillance network. And then, as I mentioned, shortest path bridging is an industry standard. There's a couple of companies that sell shortest path bridging technology, done in a proprietary way, which is probably not the best thing because it's not interoperable with other manufacturers. So if a customer has a network of X type and you want to take the advantage of the capabilities that shortest path bridging gives you, with our implementation, it does interoperate with other networks that may not be using SPB. So you can get the benefits of this technology without having to rip and replace an entire network. So we talk about software-defined automation, and the idea is that inherent in the technology is capabilities to create the physical security infrastructure without having to do some of the things you might have to do if it was a pure a traditional network, I guess I would say. So the rest of my slides here are blank.
So Scott, you want to
populating here. Well, excuse me. We were on slide 13, and for some reason or other.
Do you want me to, Bill, do you want me to start going over some of
Yeah,
the stuff?
yeah, go ahead, please do.
Okay. So, so if you can just advance the slide, Scott, I'm going to talk a little bit about shortest path bridging and why I'm a true believer in it. It truly is outstanding performance. I mean, it's a Ferrari level engine type of performance, and it's been that way since it was introduced to the video surveillance market years ago by Nortel and then finally Avaya. And it's absolutely outstanding what it can do. It will make your video populate faster. It will make the system more responsive. It will reduce the complexity, and it will drive a higher level of performance. With Alcatel-Lucent, and Avaya, I've tested this to over 16,000 video feeds at 6 megabits per second and broken cores and watched the VMS not even know it happened. So there's a lot of things that we could talk about as far as complexity of how shortest path bridging works. And I don't know that we want to go into that. Nobody really needs to know how the engine works. They just need to know that it works. And the fact of the matter is it's built on a non-spanning tree type of topology. It heals itself very quickly. It scales very well, and it brings a high level of performance at a competitive price point into the video surveillance market. So if you advance over to the next slide there, Scott, we built this automated app. 2.5 years ago, I sat with the executives at Alcatel-Lucent in Calabasas, and I approached them and said, I love shortest path bridging. It is the most high performing video surveillance environment that you can put for physical security and video responsiveness or real-time video. But how do we simplify it? How do we take the complex and make it simple? When I first came into the industry, I own it 18 plus years ago, I set off on this mission. How do I take everybody and train them to be network engineers? Well, the fact is people don't want to be network engineers. So how do we make it so simple they don't need to? So we build an automation technique into the application itself that allows you to do two types of networks. Layer 2 flat networks that are in a single VLAN that can scale up to 25 switches, have DHCP services or host configuration services for IP directly built into the application, enable you to turn on power over Ethernet, enable IP multicast services by default, set time and security, and have port level security to lock down the ports once you deploy your system directly from the application. And we do this on the 6300 series platform from Alcatel, which is a very cost competitive platform, kind of an entry mid-tier level switch. And we allow integrators to actually deploy this using the smartphone or application. Now, why that's important is it allows you to scale resources. And I've taken this challenge to many integrators, and I've told them that I can take your team, and with a matter of an hour and a half, we can take your entire team and get them to a point where they can competently deploy an IP network that they have control over the IP space or the IP addresses, or a greenfield network, the same way a network engineer and architect would, with about an hour to an hour and a half worth of training. And more importantly, when it's done through software-defined automation, there is no human element involved. It means that when you do it, you're going to get it right the first time. You're not going to be rolling trucks back to that site trying to fix problems that are network related. You know that you get it right the first time because it's done through automation and templates. The other thing it does is it turns on DHCP with an infinite lease. So in the industry, a lot of times we'll see that people will take all of their IP cameras and statically IP them, which is incredibly time consuming. When you deploy the core switch using this tablet or IP or smartphone, when you deploy the core template deploys a DHCP server that automatically starts pushing IP addresses out with an infinite lease to those cameras that you connect at the edge. So in a matter of minutes in the lab here, I've taken 15 switches, programmed them, started plugging cameras in, and within about 20, 30 minutes, the cameras are coming online and everything can be seen. So the idea is to use automation to get that right and do it in a very simplistic fashion through automation of the smartphone app that removes the human element and any possibility of error. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So in the layer 3 side, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about this, we have deployed layer 2 and full layer 3 high availability multicast routed environments. If you have a mission critical environment like a prison or a casino, or some type of environment like a hospital that always has to stay online on its independent network, you can deploy a multi-subnet, multicast routed network the same way you would deploy a layer 2 using the smartphone. There are templates that are built into it, and as long as you pick an independent template for each switch, the network will automatically provision itself correctly. All you have to do is simply follow the topology to plug it in. And I think one of the best references for this is I have an integrator I work with for many years now. He is not a networking guy, does not know networking well, but after this application was released, successfully deployed a casino down in Louisiana single-handedly himself. Being able to deploy a high availability casino with redundant cores, edge switches, redundant links, simply by using the app and not having to know necessarily what he was doing, but knowing that it would get done right the first time. And even more importantly, when you follow the templates, if you have a switch go out, let's say VLAN 30 or template 30 goes out on a switch, you can grab, the end user can even grab a replacement switch powered on, plug the app in, redeploy the template, move the cables, and in a matter of minutes, they've repaired themselves from their own switch failure. So we built a lot of capabilities into it that allow you to execute recovery in an automated fashion based on these templates. Okay, let's go to the next one. This just talks about.
Are you on?
Yeah.
Sorry. Which slide are you looking at right this second, Darren?
I can't see the slide numbers. So
18.
Oh,
It's
okay.
slide 18, gentlemen. Slide
Gotcha.
18.
Gotcha. Got it. Okay.
Are you back online?
I'm looking. I think I'm looking at it now. If it doesn't freeze, well, so this is just kind of an additional extension to what Darren was just saying. So the idea again is that this mobile app allows you to become more productive, your technicians to be more productive. People who don't have any real knowledge of networks, but they can plug things in and follow instructions, can use this app, can either install the first time or go back and resolve problems subsequently. And if a new switch is required, put the switch back in the rack and then upload into that switch the configuration of the previous switch that was there without having to touch anything else. So in terms of making your teams more efficient, and then I also think improving the mean time to remediation, something like this app, this tool provides that capability pretty uniquely. I mean, unlike other network technologies that I've seen deployed before. So very unique in that capability. And I think anybody who's seen it, handled it, and used it to deploy networks, as Darren just described in the casino in Louisiana, really get the full appreciation of it. I don't think it could be underestimated. So the next slide, 19, is really more just some kind of some views, screenshots of how this thing looks.
Bill, can I interrupt for 1 second and ask a question for Bill and for Darren? So you just mentioned there a moment ago the concept, the idea of pulling a switch, putting in a different switch, a new switch, and being able to effectively recreate the configuration of that switch, almost instantaneously, if not instant. You've saved the configuration file. Can either one of you kind of describe a scenario where that might come into play in a way that would be useful for the integrator and, of course, the audience as well? But tell me a little more about that. What could happen that would make such a feature extra valuable?
So I can give you an example of where it has happened at a property. It actually is at a casino where we have these templates deployed, where it happens. Sometimes things don't always sit on a UPS. Sometimes things takes hit or power surges, and unfortunately you blow a power supply on a switch. And when that happens, more often than not, it happens at 2 a.m. and you may be able to get a hold of your integrator, but they may or may not be in the region. And for something that's mission critical and you can't afford that downtime, the ability to either take the tablet and walk the technical team of the end user through that, basically saying, okay, you've got a dead power supply. You guys keep a back stock of OS 6860 P48 switches, grab one, mount it below it, power it up. Grab the app, connect it with the cable. There's a label on the switch. It says switch 28, meaning it's VLAN 28 with an IP interface of 192.168.28.1. Go to the app, launch it, select deploy, select template 28, and select go. Once it comes back and reports that the configuration has been pushed to it, you can simply move the cables down and your network will come back online. Even if the integrator can't get there, it's simple enough you can walk somebody through that. And in some cases, we see that the end users' IT staff are actually starting to expand and deploy their own switches. For smaller jobs that don't require a lot of attention because they can.
And Darren,
template structure.
Is it fair also to then say that, a lot of times we tend to think of switch and camera, right? Have port, here's camera, plug in. But anything could be connected to this specific switch in your example, right? It could be a camera, it could be a bridge to another switch, et cetera.
Absolutely. As long as you move the cables, you just safely, and not so much for the copper cables, okay? But for the uplinks, you got to make sure you get the uplinks back exactly where they were. The rest of the cables, you can patch them down anywhere on that switch, and deal with it later, because it's going to put itself in a single VLAN on that switch that routes out. And you're going to have two active uplinks. As long as the uplinks move, and even if you swap them, it wouldn't matter, it would still work. But you should keep them the way they were. You move the cables down for your uplinks for your redundancy. You move the cables down, and your network is going to recover, because the exact configuration that you use from a templated structure is going to be pushed directly back into that replacement switch. Then you take the other switch and put it out to an RMA, and we get it replaced for you.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's very triply important because, time on site for an integrator is so critical, and heaven forbid it was a 2 a.m. truck call. So that speaks, I think, a lot to the value that can be gained from an automated technology to the benefit of an integrator.
And what you're looking at is the actual template. So I'll let Bill talk a little bit about it. But this is the actual application from captures from a smartphone of how you select the switch templates that will go out and be pushed out through that network.
So I think, so these are screenshots, but I think one other point. So it's increasingly, networks are, or video surveillance networks or physical security networks are embracing other types of non-IT devices, right? Sensors of various kinds. Some of this stuff becomes even more important. I mean, a given camera in a given location that fails at, or if the switch fails at 2 o'clock in the morning may not be mission critical, but you may have other things that are attached to that are mission critical. And so, kind of back to the whole idea that you don't have to wait. You can get this thing resolved quickly, I think is critical. So on slide 19 and then also on slide 20, there's a number of different screen captures. But I think the message obviously is that you can, you can select templates as appropriate. You can apply those templates to the switch, whether it's just on the initial setup and configuration or deployment, or subsequently if something fails. There's a certain amount of time, obviously, for it to upload and the network to come back together, so to speak. But the capability is there to do that when that's really all you have to do. Connect the cables, select the template, push a button, and upload. And then there's some other, I guess, more, and Darren, since you created this app, you might want to speak about some of the nuances if you think it's appropriate. But I think it's a very underlying. It's obviously complicated, but BCD has done a tremendous amount of work to take all of the complexity out of this. I mean, there's probably mobile apps for network management, but that doesn't solve the problem, right? You still have to go in and just because you're doing it on a phone doesn't mean it's any less complex. But here we've taken all that out and put this layer of simplicity on top of it so that you don't have to really think about it. You just kind of do what it says, push the appropriate buttons, and wait for the network to start working again.
So Bill, let me take a minute and talk about kind of one of the things that I would put out to the integrators and people who are on here is you really can't appreciate this till you see it. We can have a demo done for you, or we can grab a couple of switches and bring them out and show you how easy it is to actually deploy this. But the form factor is when you plug into it, there's also some additional feature sets. When you need to open up a ticket with any switch vendor, the first thing they're going to ask you for is they're going to ask you for the serial number. They're going to ask you for what the model of the switch is. They're going to ask you for the current code revision and those things that they ask. The minute you plug into this switch, the smartphone application brings that up on the actual display screen. So if you have to open up a ticket, everything is there. Everything is available to you. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that you can actually look at the configuration and see what's on there to ensure that it actually got pushed down to it. But more importantly, the templates that you build into this, as long as you use a unique switch template for each switch, any IP configuration you put on this is going to work on layer 2. And as long as you follow the IP configuration for layer 3 and use unique templates, it'll work as well. And as I said, this requires very little training to get people up to speed on this. What's not shown in this slide deck is the things that we built into the next release of it that's coming out. And I think it's really important to talk about that. The diagnostic capabilities that we built into this, and I know you say me, Bill, it was kind of my brainchild, but really the software engineers at Alcatel-Lucent have done a great job programming this and working with us, taking the vision of what we're doing and pushing it into the product. But at the end of the day, you're going to have diagnostics. A technician will be able to walk out to site and literally plug into the switch and see what is the CPU load that's currently on the switch. Is it being overloaded? You'll be able to run a report on the uplinks and see what is the percentage utilization inbound and outbound of traffic capability. If you're over 85% utilization, you know you've saturated that link and you need to upgrade your link capacity. You can take a look at each individual port and run statistics reports directly from the app and see the errors that are happening. Are you dropping packets? And run that report directly from the smartphone app. You can also take a look at the speed and duplex that it's running at. If it should be gig and it's running 100 meg half duplex, you've got a problem. And furthermore, you can run a TDR report on it, time domain reflectometry. You can choose a port and run a TDR. It will tell you if it meets the cabling standard and the length of the cable directly from within this application. So if you have a suspected cable that you think exceeds the length or distance for the recommended specification, the TDR will report that and tell you that either it doesn't meet the cabling standard, it's miswired and has a short, or it exceeds the capacity of what it's capable of doing from a length standard. And all of these things are going to be built directly into the smartphone app in an intuitive way that anybody can be trained, regardless of network background, to isolate and determine where the problems are and get the right people involved.
Darren, we got a couple of questions I want to get us to real quick. We'll start with the second one first because it's probably easiest. What mobile OS is the app currently available on?
It's Android today, and there is going to be a release for Apple that is going to be coming out later on this year. But today it's Android phone and or tablet. But there is a release of Apple coming out.
Gotcha. The first question, which is actually a bit longer, from Gava. How are you, Gava? He says, can we just get the software for sites that have no BCD video servers? So I guess what he's actually asking is, it's kind of, if they have nothing from us except for this app and they happen to have some ALE switches, can they use the app?
Yeah, they could. This app is developed to do a quick deploy of layer 2 and layer 3 networks. If they have the flexibility if you have the choice of where you put your VLANs and what IP structure you're going to use, and you can follow the templates that we've built, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for that. Please continue. If there are more questions, please continue to bring them in.
All right, why don't we move it forward and I'll hand it on back over to Bill.
So yeah, we're running, I won't say short on time, but I want to make sure that we conclude on time. So the last point here, of this three-pronged, kind of critical capabilities of networks for video surveillance is security. Now, no question security is important in any network. And there's, all kinds of systems, devices, and methodologies that are deployed to ensure that networks are secure. And so, firewalls and such. We're not a firewall, but because of the technology that is underlying here, the shortest path bridging, there is the ability to isolate traffic from one, say, type of network or one plane of network to another. So no point in talking about why security is important, but I think everybody's aware that there have been numerous instances where video surveillance systems in particular have been used because a camera's been unplugged, somebody's connected to it, but they just tend to be a little bit more vulnerable sometimes because there's not always the same level of other types of security built in. So we provide the capability to do something called network segmentation. Now, all switches, I think, these days have that capability, but because this is operating at layer 2, the degree of separation between the different networks, if you will, is much more granular. So, you can accomplish some of the segmentation with very sophisticated VLANs, which are extraordinarily difficult to put together, configure, manage, and keep operational, or at least.
Yeah, let me jump in. We had another question come in real quick.
Sure.
In regards to the software, Darren, where can you get it, and are we charging for it?
So there is no charge for the app. You can actually download it, BCD Video Assistant. You can get it from Google Play today. More importantly, we have a kit that we put together, a discounted price kit on a 6350 base switch. I believe it's 24 port with a tablet with a software preloaded. So if people want to get hold of one of those kits and they want to kick the tires on that, we have those available. We also have the capability, whenever COVID ends, lockdowns, we'd love to come out and take a look at, with our teams, what your needs are on the networking side. Where do you think you have deficiencies, and show you how to use this app to scale your resources. Because if you can go from having 1 or 2 networking guys to having 20 networking guys, you become more scalable, you become more adaptive, and become more resilient to demands and needs that come in. And we really love to come out and talk to integrators about how they can leverage this tool and show them how they can use this to scale out their own internal resources without hiring more people.
And Darren, the app itself is actually Android only, including you can't use it on a browser base, or you can't use it on Windows at this point, or Mac.
Today, you cannot. I will tell you that there is going to be a time coming soon where you may see a lot of these feature sets built into something directly, as opposed to outside of a specific smartphone itself.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really go into elaborate where we're going to do that, but
sure.
There are going to take this technology and adapt it into something that you can use in a traditional environment used to working in physical security. So you may see this type of technology up on an operations wall.
Did you mention the connectivity between the app and the switch? It is Bluetooth. Is it on the same Wi-Fi? How are you connecting?
So when you purchase a kit, for each integrator, we send them 1 or 2 kits that have all the different adapters for the phone, USB-C, micro USB. You plug directly into the phone. You can do a Bluetooth connection. However, I tend to shy a little bit away from Bluetooth, just because from a security standpoint, if you can plug the cable in, use the cable.
But you can directly plug. So while the Android OS is the only current version, there are just a host of inexpensive Android tablets available that a person could get and then use in this type of scenario, because all they need is the right connection physically between the tablet and the switch.
Correct. The kit that we send out actually has a tablet embedded preloaded. It has the switch, and it has all the cabling in there.
Very good. Thank you.
We are, very quickly moving toward the iOS implementation, and later this year we'll have that, and it'll have all the same capabilities. And so, I think it's because we think this is such an important capability, this app, and the simplicity of it in general. As Darren said, there's development underway to make this maybe expand these capabilities to additional platforms to make it even more more functional and available. So. Kind of just closing with security aspects. So, the topic can get pretty complicated, but if you look at it at an environment, this kind of quick picture on slide 22 of, multiple network types on a single network infrastructure. So you've got video surveillance, you may have smart building, you may have other IT networks in some environments where these things are condensed, consolidated onto a single network. This technology allows you to separate those networks, essentially making them completely invisible from one another, as if they were on separate physical networks. And so the ability to come in on a video from a missing camera port on a video surveillance network, or a thermometer on an IoT network, and then navigate through the rest of the network to potentially compromise other systems, virtually eliminated. Just because of the technology that's inherent in the switch itself. So again, not a firewall per se, but the ability to isolate and then lock down ports because you don't have access, a device or a person doesn't have access to a given port unless they match the profile that's been established for that endpoint. So the security features are extraordinarily robust with not a lot of effort to make that happen.
So Bill,
I guess go ahead.
Thing I want to throw in there, and sorry to interrupt, but I don't want to forget to talk about this. That application has cyber hardening and cybersecurity with the next release built into it. So with a slider bar, when you're done configuring the switch and plugging in your cameras and plugging in your servers and everything else, you can simply take the slider bar and cyber harden the switch from attack.
Can you expand on that, Darren?
Yeah, there's a lot of things when you look at providing cybersecurity or cyber hardening something. There's things that you want to lock down: SSH only access, changing your password. You're definitely going to do DOS, or denial of service attack protection. You're going to turn on root guard from spanning trees so nobody can take over the root of your network. You are going to lock down SNMP profiles to where you can't have access to those. You are going to turn on port-based security, or basically the ability to provide port security based on IP and MAC address to lock it down. Potentially traffic profiling. I mean, there's a lot of things that you go in and you would turn on as a network engineer. If I'm going to go into your switch and I want to cyber harden it, there's things I'm going to configure in a certain way. We take all of those, like dynamic ARP inspection, DHCP snooping, things that are recommended for cyber hardening, and just turn them into a slider bar for you so that you can turn that feature set on without having to go through the process of learning how to actually do that.
Got it. Thank you.
So just kind of quick wrap up. So I think, Darren, thank you very much. My apologies for some technical difficulties here, but hopefully we've been able to provide you with kind of some information about things to look for in a network, why a network is so important, and hopefully we've been able to show you that the combination of security, the combination of automation and high performance through an ALE network can provide you with that robust environment that you need for video surveillance. So again, oftentimes people will just say, well, we'll just put some switches out there, or we'll just use whatever the network is that they're running in the enterprise. And I would say push back on those kinds of things, because you can end up putting your very expensive video surveillance system on a network that is really not properly designed to support that intense environment, and end up with a system that doesn't work well, and a customer that's unhappy, and an awful lot of time and energy spent on your part to make something work properly that probably will never work properly if the network is not the right network. So just a couple of final slides here. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise. Won't go into a lot of detail, but let me just say that we're proud to say we've just completed our 100-year anniversary. We started way back in 1919, way before there were networks in the phone environment, and we've progressed over time. So today we're a global organization providing enterprise networks to thousands of customers, high-profile customers, through a network of resellers around the world. And we're also very proud to say that BCD Video is our networking partner for video surveillance globally. So anything you need from a networking perspective, where you think that ALE can be a benefit, BCD is the partner.
Bill, is this a slide? Is this slide deck that we have presented today available for public viewing?
From my perspective, it is. I don't think there's any reason why we wouldn't want to share it.
Okay, then yes. I know we've had a few requests for the slide deck. So yes, it will be made available to all the attendees who were kind enough to take an hour and spend it with us today.
And I'd certainly say that if anybody wants to, to take this and maybe personalize it a bit, or have Darren or me or somebody from BCD or ALE work with you to present it to a customer, we're happy to do that. We think that this message is important, and we think that we've got technology that can benefit the industry, and we're investing heavily in it just to make sure that we are seen as the main player for video surveillance networking. So
very nice.
I think you know who we are. And we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining this morning.
And on behalf of us at BCD, Bill, thank you very much. I know you've got a tremendously busy day and week ahead, so appreciate the time. And Darren, as usual, thank you. Amanda for setting it up, and everyone that attended, thank you very much. And be on the lookout for the next one of the web series. On that, we bid you adieu and thanks for attending.